All right, so the modular series continues. If you're new to these kinds of videos, I'm going to explain how to kind of get set up here, but this isn't a beginner tutorial. Just keep that in mind. This is for guys trying to create more like architectural type elements, but this is also going to apply to props and all kinds of stuff. That's what this video is about. It's about staggering units. It's about setting up other kinds of things in a modular fashion. It's going to help you understand the whole big picture when it comes to doing the architecture as well. We'll be playing around with some of that too. So let's just jump into this. When you're a kid, you played with blocks, right? And this is pretty easy to do. And first, turn on snapping. Make sure it's on absolute. Grid snap, rotate, scale. We're going to be using occasionally active element here. Just keep that in mind. You'll see me switch that on here in a little bit. And but when you're a kid, you're playing with blocks, right? And you probably took some blocks and stacked them up really high or something, and they all fell over, right? Well, somewhere along the way, someone realized if you take blocks and you stagger them, right? You can do this number. And before you know it, people were building, brick walls, and then they were making arches and all kinds of fun stuff. You see how this doesn't snap to the grid? Active element. When you have groups of objects, you want to use an active element. So the highlighted one here, hold shift and select the one you want to use. So yeah, look, that works, right? So it's like creating a brick wall. Very simple, right? Offset unit or offset pieces anyway. So right. So what happens when you make a corner, right? Take some pieces, you rotate them, and you're like, man, I want this to go this way now. How do I make this corner? You end up with something like this, and it looks weird. I'm going to need special pieces to fill in the holes, right? So corner units, usually you have to make them for that reason because, well, you have to. But not always the case. But generally speaking, you might want to make corner units. And so there you go. If you can't see the overlapping here, the Z fighting with these, it wouldn't matter. But if you could, you might want to actually like fix this area up as well. Determine if you're going to cut into this one or cut into that one or cut them down the middle, right? So things like that. Now, all the videos I showed up to this point, this is basically what you're doing. Okay, it's just a little confusing because a wall is just one level, right? And if you had two stories, it would be more like that, right? Yeah, so just to prove a point, select some of these, scale them in, and it looks awfully familiar now, right? Compared to my walls video, where I showed you how you could kind of stagger walls or use different units. Okay, very similar kind of process. Okay. Now, let's actually make one that's realistic size here because I'm using too small of a cubes. So I'm going to make 2 meter plane like you should by default because I am using a zero 0.1 meter scale for the grid. Everything snaps to 10 centimeters and all my primitives come in smaller basically. So I'm going to rotate this out, pull it up. All right, we're going to make a 3 meter tall wall unit and I'm going to snap it over to the grid. So we can see here, now it's 2 by 3 meters tall, right? This is how you would normally run it out, all right? Some rooms, you're going to end up needing something like a 4 meter wall. And as a result, we get this going on. So what happens if you have 3 by 2s next to a 4? They obviously don't line up. So you probably want to do something like maybe make a little unit that goes on top of those, right? So you might want something like that. But you can do other things as well. Like if you need a 1 meter unit, use two of them, right? And if maybe you want like a 1.5, right? So what happens when you have a 1.5? It looks like this, but if you repeat it once, you see, right? And you repeat it 4 times though. Hey, look, it all lines up again. So think about masonry work, like how people inlay bricks and do arches and things like that. And your modular system will start to actually kind of make sense because if you just doing blocking shapes, the most simple kind of shapes you can, this is what you're going to start to see happen is things kind of start repeating over and over and over again. So there's all kinds of different units you can use. So 4 meter wall, 3 meter, right? If I do that one like so, you'll see they don't line up, right? That's a problem. Well, what if I go a little bit higher, right? And that's how high you would have to go to have those line up, basically, right? Not not probably the most practical use of different units and measurements, but probably better off having a little short section to get them realigned, because then you could potentially run out this wall this way now, right? See how that works out? You probably don't need that third story. Pretty simple, right? Well, what happens when you have floors as well? This is kind of another little section I kind of glossed over too quick, but your floors, I personally like having 20 centimeter thick floors. I think that works pretty well, but 10 centimeter, you could have one centimeter if you really wanted to. But 10 centimeter works well. 20 centimeters is a little bit better in my opinion if you're doing multi-structures, and so, or multi-level structures. And so anyways, you can see here, these floors, when they're lined up on the grid, the same as the wall, all right? This is how it's acting and behaving, okay? Now, if you put this up here, you do the same thing, look what ends up happening up here. All right, so you got this whole wall going up to there, which is cool. But what if you need a ceiling tile that has some thickness to it too? That would end up doing something like this. So you could use a total of 40 centimeters in between the two, or do maybe like a 30 centimeter ceiling section if you want thicker ceilings, right? And all in all though, if you use those two units next to each other, that becomes 50 centimeters, so half a meter, right? See where that's going? So let's say you wanted to create a staircase. Let's take one of these, right? And we're going to go ahead and push this all the way in like so. And this is going to be 30 centimeters. And this top section, we're going to drop it to there. So we got 10 centimeter, right? So of course we're going to want to have a first step. That's always good, right? So we'll leave it right here. But the first step would go something like so, right? The side view here. Hit Alt-Z real quick. Shift D, snap it over, Shift R now. Okay. So Shift R all the way up. And I probably could just do an array, it'd be easier, huh? Yeah, let's do the array. Control Z all the way back. All right. Bad idea. You delete those two. It's not such a big deal. All right. So this piece, we're going to do an array. Array. We're going to use relative, and we're going to put that at 0. Let's try 1. Okay, that's good. And let's do 1. Might have to do negative ones. And we'll just bump it up. Hey, that's a lot easier. All right, so this needs to get to the floor level right here. So it's in line with this floor. And right here is the point. So you can see that works, right? So 10 centimeter up, 30 centimeter run, that works. It's a very elongated staircase. It's a pretty long run, right, to go up that. So what would you do if you wanted to change this a little bit? So what I'm going to do is duplicate it first, pull it out to the side over here. But let's try doing something a little bit different. Instead of using 10 centimeters, let's do like 11.25. So 0.025, right? So that's going to be, right, you get the idea. If we turn off the array, you can see 0.125 meters high, okay? Other than that, we haven't changed it, so it's going to go up a little bit faster. And as a result, you can see it comes right up to the floor as well, okay? For 3 meter sections, you can use 0.15, right? So 15 centimeters. These ones, we can actually use these two different slopes, but you can also, for the 3 meter one, you can potentially use this one too, I think, right? So if we bumped it back down, you see that 3 meter wall section, +2 because we got to do the 20 centimeter floor for the next level. So this works here as well. You see, so some things will work, some things won't work with other things, but you got to just keep in mind all the different values, all the different units, right? There's tons of different ways you can approach a situation. So if you need different slopes, this is just one example. Some staircases obviously are custom, and some are like outdoor stairs that are, I don't know, like half a meter long, basically. And you can see how that works out. All right. Now notice that this one starts at this grid line anyways, right? And this one starts at this grid, or stops right there at that grid, okay? And this one also happens to be doing the same thing. Well, but it extends a little bit further. Okay, so you're going to have to make your units make sense to you on how you want them to act and behave and all that fun stuff. So if I line that up there, you'll see this comes halfway basically, a little bit over halfway, I think. Yeah. So you have to think, you got to take little things like that into consideration when you're making like the rail system for it and stuff like that. You can start to line everything up later on. All right. And so that brings me to kind of the next point. You're going to learn this stuff by doing it. Like you can just watch me talk about this all day long, but you got to start playing around these very basic principles, okay? Because things are really going to kind of mess with you when you, as soon as you start doing the thickness to the walls. So most people, when I was showing those other videos anyways, are probably confused because I said like, hey, if you pull this out 10 centimeters, you're good, right? So that your origin point stays in the center, okay? And not, you don't want it in the center up there. I'm going to kind of show you where to put it here in a sec. But the thing is that 10 centimeters would give you 20 centimeter thick walls if you had another side. So if I control M, middle mouse click, and mirror real quick, right? So that'd be a 20 centimeter thick wall. In general, we're not worried about this thing being repetitive and all. Well, we're worried about it going up and down, first of all. That's one. And then this way and this way, right? So what happens with this when it comes away from the center of the symmetry there potentially is that it doesn't really matter where it goes. You can make a wall super thick if you want. So some walls you might want thick, some you might want thin. And at the end of the day, if it's doing what you need it to do, then you're good. That's all that matters. So like something like this, we could run it all the way back to the symmetry or the grid, whatever you want to call it, right? And this won't matter. We can bevel these. This can be a unit, right? You'll see a lot of guys doing this kind of stuff. Matter of fact, I'm just going to use box cutter real quick, cut into this, but you'll see all kinds of guys creating little pieces like this, like super fast in just about every YouTube video I've seen so far anyways. And the reason why that they show this is because it's the simplest way of working. They say, oh, make something like this. And then if you had, we're going to place the origin point right here, by the way. So Shift S, cursor is selected. And after you put the cursor there, if you're using native Blender, if you're using machine tools, you can just do what I did. But then you'll do press Shift S, cursor is selected, and then do origin to 3D cursor. Okay, and you got to do one in edit mode and one in object mode. So anyways, once we're done with this, by rotation and scale, make sure it's all set up, and then I'm going to mirror across X in this case. Right, so this could be a modular component, right? Like a wall unit or something, right? But it's solid. It's almost a completely solid object. Like we can literally stack it on top of itself, and it's not a big deal. So these are very universal because they work in pretty much all directions for the most part, right? Well, they can potentially. It wouldn't look quite right, I think, if you lined a bunch of them up like this, but you get the idea. You could if you really wanted to, if that's something that was what you wanted to do, but it's useful, all right? Whereas these ones are less useful. These ones really only want to behave well with themselves. And if you were to create doors in them, so you do like a loop cut, you cut a 2-meter door or whatever, do something like this, you can see instantly what's going to happen here is that when this mirrors over, or you should be rotating. I'm going to talk about looping here in a sec, but you have that wall thickness, so you start creating the plug for it. The little door frame is called a plug or whatever. So you do that number. And we'll just extrude it out real quick. Just like that. Delete that face. I'm going to merge all that real quick. Okay. And then, ooh, I did not know it was going to do that. All right, so let's try that again. We're going to do a, what did I just do? Recalculate outside. I did something weird there. Okay, there we go. Let's just do that. So let's say this was just bridge edge loops. Control E, bridge edge loops. Let's say that's a door frame. And we probably want it to be aligned a little bit more better. Something like that. This top, oh, turn box cutter off real quick. let's say this top section is just something like that, okay? So we can have really basic plugs like this if the wall is very symmetrical. The idea here is that this is the same as this, okay? The only difference is that it doesn't have the borders on it, okay? Because it doesn't need them. You're not planning on this being exposed at any point, all right? So that's why that thing is so confusing. And a lot of times I'm sitting there telling you to break these plugs down as well. This can be confusing as well because it doesn't make sense until you see a practical example of what's going on here. So let me save this real quick. Yeah, example, fun. And let me open up a project I got. All right, so this project right here, this wall unit is modeled as accurately as I could tell to a real building, okay? And it should be approximately the same size and everything. But it just so happens this is like a 4 meter, you can see right here, 4 meter by 4 meter, right? And it's almost a meter thick, but it's not quite. Look at where the windows are placed, right? So this inside section is much thicker than the outside section. Well, in theory, I mean, this piece hangs down here, but you get the idea of what's going on here. Okay? And so where's this the line here for the piece? I haven't split it up yet, but it's going to be going right here in the middle of the window, or near the middle of the window anyways. You can see where it's kind of lining up now, right? So I got a little tiny gasket. Oh, that's not the editable one. This is arrayed right now. There's a reason this is arrayed too. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But look at where it has to go to get the window right in the center there. Okay? It's pretty wild. It's a wild setup. And this is going to be interesting because this piece itself is going to be reutilized without an interior. And because it's not going to have an interior, what ends up happening here is that I'm going to be replacing the window, okay, or the plug in this case. I'm going to be replacing that with a false interior, right? Using the POM interior map. And so what ends up happening is this is what we're left with, right? One single unit like this. These will be plugs, these windows, which I can't separate them right now unless I apply all this, and so I'll swap the material on those so that they're unique and it's not going to be repeated everywhere. Well, I don't know if I even have to technically separate them if I want two draw calls or whatever. Anyway, so that's kind of beyond the fact there, but you see where that's going, right? So I need this as an asset, but I also need this as an asset. And then it gets a little bit more fun because this is going to be the standard wall, right? And look at the border here at the bottom, which I haven't finished actually, but it has to dip into the floor a little bit, okay? Because I do need it to tile vertically potentially. But the baseboard here, there is no baseboard. It's actually an inset at the very bottom of the wall, okay? And so because of that, it does it through here as well. And then that's pretty frustrating to begin with, but this is a 4 by 4 meter section. That's just how it happens to work out best right there. And then to transition to this wall, I would have a major problem here, except I created this little cap to hide this little area. See where that's going? Okay. Because they don't line up, right? Not with, well, this unit won't work that well without this because this has to repeat as well, but at a certain point it's going to stop. If I want it to be able to stop at least. Like it will repeat fine and dandy just going all the way down like this, but we can make a whole building real fast, but if I ever want it to stop, I need an additional piece. Okay. And one thing I wanted to mention here real quick. So this is divided more or less into thirds. Okay. So here, right, there's your two cut lines. So this unit is kind of like three elements. All right. It just so happens that when you have a third, this object, think of dividing something into a third, right? You end up with an irrational number. Basically, it's like an infinite number. That's what an irrational number is. It means it doesn't have an exact point in space. It just continues on forever. So dot 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 3 forever whatever. When you lay those out, if you were to try to put that on the grid and start snapping it all the way down, it'll never work. Even if you snapped it to the actual vertex, what eventually will happen is that you will never actually, it will eventually come off the grid, or it will never line back up to the grid at some point, pretty much. And I'm pretty sure that would work with the array too. But I'm using an array right now where it just, wherever it stops, it starts and it keeps going. And at a certain point, I'm pretty sure if we looked really far close enough, this is probably slightly off, and it is. Look, you see? Just slightly off. Okay, it's maybe off on that side, but you get the idea. Because it's an irrational number, we're going to have to fudge it a little bit and get it to line up back onto the grid because, thirds don't work out too well, generally speaking. Now, can you use them? Yes, but you have to use them in a set, okay, until you can force it back to the grid, basically, is what I'm getting at. It's just weird mathematical stuff like that usually. So anyways, let's go ahead and check out the ceiling tiles. These ceiling tiles are actually kind of interesting. These are scaled to be a 4-meter little section, okay? And because of that, they're cut like so. You can see it's just like a regular grid, okay? Now, the other section of this building is going to have the same tiles, but they have to be offset, and they happen to be offset by this weird third, basically. So they have to be cut. Basically, you see how that's going there? The same process here almost. And so they can almost never logically line back up until you use them in a series. And so I have to match them up with the lights and with the tiles of the ceiling plus the walls. So these have to line up with the walls as well. Okay. And so if you haven't guessed by now, I'm building the CIA HQ building. And this is the room that I guess everybody was sitting in during 9/11 or something, but whatever the case. Could be a movie set for all I know how shadow government organizations work. But regardless, you get the idea? It's starting to pan out, right? What about something like this? This is actually pretty unique. This is going to be, potentially I could mirror one of these ones over to the other side, right? But this is all marble trimmed with little marble tiles at the top. And you see where this is all going? I got to have custom unique kind of cuts for this area, but it could be mirrored over here. But if I don't want repetitious tiles or repetitious textures repeating, I should use world space align textures or something like that, but it's at a weird angle, so to have some kind of compensation. Then you got to set up this crazy custom shader. All kinds of stuff goes into this. But this is kind of just a block out to get started anyways. So more or less, the point here being is that when this is broken down, sometimes your units aren't as simple as you think. It might just be like a whole section like this. That might be a modular component, right? This whole section might be a component. This whole section here might be a component, right? But every time you break an object up in a game engine, it's going to start adding draw calls, basically. Draw calls can be batched together. That's something that can happen, but even then, it can only handle so much. So sometimes you got to build things out as larger pieces all by themselves, right? And so if you have a really large object that, even though you could make it modular, doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing to make it modular. You would probably run into a situation where you need to have it all as one solid piece, and because of that, trying to unique one-off UV map all of this, that's probably not going to happen, where you could do that if it was all modular. So you're going to end up using like world space aligned textures, and you're probably going to do like layering with the textures and all kinds of other fun stuff. So sometimes the UV maps go out the window, all right? But generally speaking, we'll go back to the original scene real quick. Generally speaking here, this is what we're looking at, right? And your walls are very simple. You can do a section of wall, rotate it 90 degrees, place it back like so. Right? This would be a corner unit. select it real quick. There you go. You got a wall, a corner unit, right? And in general, these other corners, so you got convex and concave corners. This one's going to be a concave corner over here. Okay. This is a convex. That means this is this outside and this is the in. Some people name them out and in and stuff like that, but this one over here, okay, you don't necessarily need to make a special corner if you have a 90-degree kind of tight corner like that. You can get away with this. Although if you really want to, you can make a special piece for it. You know? Right? So when you're laying these kind of walls out, this is where looping comes into play. This particular shape isn't going to be that big of a deal, but as you're laying it out, you want to keep rotating it so that you create a giant loop. Your textures will always be seamless if you do this. You won't have mirror problems, meaning like if you were to mirror things or scale them in negative or whatever, that could potentially have seams or where you could see like clearly where you've mirrored things. And the texture will be inverted basically on the other unit. So everything should line up in this manner, right? I don't know if these were UV mapped. Let's check. Okay, they are. So let's just throw a texture on it real quick. We'll see how this is laying out. The new material, base color, image texture. I'm going to open texture library, something like bricks or something, concrete. I thought I had a little brick section. Maybe it's under walls. Pretty sure I have a wall section too. Yeah. All right. We'll throw these bricks up. You notice this one was elongated? We want something more squared. Let's try this one. Actually, I like that other one. We're doing that one. Okay. Go to material preview. You can see that it's rotated. They're all probably rotated. So I'm going to go into edit mode with all of them. Go to the UV editor. Rotate 90 degrees. So press R, 90. You'll see they actually aren't on the grid either. Right here. Or they're not on in the UV space for some reason. That's really bizarre. The y-axis should be 0. And the y-axis should be 1 over here. And then this one should be a 1. This one should be a 0. Don't ask me how that got messed up, but yeah. So you press the N key to bring that out under image, right? And so now you should be able to press, as long as this is the highlighted one, press Control L, you can link materials. There you go. I'm going to create a plane real quick. Okay, but now we know for sure what's going on here. Oop, that plane is way far down than I thought it was. All right. Bring it up there. See how fast it is to get it kind of positioned when you have everything set up to the grid and whatnot. So we can see clear as day now that this is all repeating all the way around. It's good, right? Just like I was saying. But if this was mirrored, so I press Control M, middle mouse click, and mirror it over this direction, perhaps instantly you see the issue. Turn that off. You'll see this a lot in video games, believe it or not. It does happen quite a bit, but it's not technically the best solution there. It's better to do a loop. The problem is sometimes you'll run into a problem with loops and things won't actually loop back together. So you need to test it to make sure if you're working in a single direction, it's going to be able to do this, right? Anyways, wanted to point that out. All right, so do one more thing with this wall here. These are not pushed in by any sort of stretch of the imagination. They're very flat. You can use these like this, and if you were going to pull it out just 10 centimeters, you could do that manually, right? Like you just say like 10 centimeters out, that's good, okay? But a lot of times, this is where my pre-offset stuff comes in. I don't use necessarily 10 centimeters, so I leave the origin point where it needs to go. In this case, the origin point should usually be in a corner, or it could be in a bottom corner, top corner. It doesn't really matter. If it's going to be on the floor, like something you want to be on the floor, usually you put it on the bottom. If it's something hanging from a ceiling, usually you want it towards the top. If it's on a wall and it's got some dimension to it, like this is thicker, so you want it to be close to a wall, you'd put it closer to the wall, maybe at the bottom or at the top or whatever, right? So just keep that in mind. Where you place your origin point's entirely up to you, but it should make sense, right? Now, the whole reason I was doing this anyways was just to prove a point that a lot of times I don't use the regular dimensions here. So because we're not worried about this necessarily lining up to the grid when it comes out, we could place it wherever we want. There are times we might want it to line up to the grid just for ease of use, but in reality, you don't have to necessarily line up to the grid. Make all kinds of things, all kinds of different ways. But this object, if it was mirrored over the other way and they were joined together, this is what most people know, or using global coordinates instead of active element now. But the this is the kind of like the standard wall unit you see in most kits, like most basic kits, right? Nothing special. There's nothing fancy to it. It's just a single wall, right? There's an inside face I got to get rid of. There we go. No, I want to dissolve that. Okay, so this is your pretty standard wall. These aren't much different, right? When they're pre-offset, they're really not that anything different. They just moved out a little bit. That's it. It's only half a wall. So like I showed you earlier, I need half a wall sometimes. So you think about it in that manner. Okay. All right. So something else I want to mention real quick, and that's going to be probably the last thing I mention. Do a big bevel right here, and bevel this way as well. All right. So your corner units, if you shift them out as well. In this case, we're just going to do like 10 centimeters, but see, we got that going on. Okay, so there's a little bit of depth to it, so I can push this back in, something like that. Let's go back to solid so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah, okay, that's technically right. Okay. Back to material preview now. Let's say this section in here, we're going to just give it a new material so we can see the difference, but let's say this is just some kind of metal frame. It's steel. Right, this is going to be where the window goes in, or whatever the case may be. It has no thickness right now, so this would end up being our plug, or less. Glass could be a part of that, perhaps. But even a plug, isolate it. Let's go to layout real quick. Even a plug, if I was to loop cut through here, see how it kind of lines up in a way, right here? It's sort of lining up. It's not perfect, but what if we wanted to make this modular? So from this corner to here, let's actually separate this. All these faces right here. Let's separate them. Okay. We're going to place the origin point right here. Like that. It's starting to look like a wall, huh? It's kind of what it's doing. 20 centimeters, 20 centimeters. Okay? We'll delete the rest. This top edge. Bump it out. Something like that for now. We're going to separate it. Okay? We're going to make this 50 centimeters. A little hard to select when you're in material preview. But we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 50 centimeter section. Got a little corner unit. Does this look familiar? This is the same idea, the same principles to create. We could unhide the rest of it, unisolate perhaps. Okay. Oh, we don't want to select that way over there. So you would rotate this, duplicate it, Shift D, duplicate, rotate, and we're going to rotate 90 degrees, pull it all the way up, place it up here, perhaps. We might want these to line up with the wall as well, or the wall should line up with it. We're going to put that one a little bit higher, I think. All right. Oh, look, that happened to work out very well. That just almost instantly worked out. Okay. So Shift D, R. I got the origin points in the wrong spot, but that's okay. For now, it's just a demo. You know, you got to put them in the right spot, right? Yeah, that's going. It's the same process. It's basically looping. Doing. This one, we should probably rotate. Matter of fact, if we don't rotate it, I don't think it's going to even line up because of the way where the origin point is. That's interesting. I didn't realize that was going to happen, but sure. 180 degrees. There we go. Hide this wall real quick. It's kind of in the way, huh? I want to see what I'm doing. Oh, maybe I can't hide it. Yes. All right. See, now it snaps. If you're using your kit wrong or building it wrong. Okay, this gotta go. It won't work. I think I'm supposed to go this way with this one. Oh, no, the other way. All right. This particular case, it won't work because the origin point's on the outskirt. Right? If it was dead center, you could probably rotate it either way, and it would probably work, to be honest. So, if this situation, you got it going like this. Now we can also do correct face attributes up here. So when we edit this wall, you can see how lining up to the grid could be beneficial in some ways. Because if I just need to have something lined up perfect with one another, there you go. Got that going on. This particular case, this wall, I would probably press E and then S, scale it in like this, turn off correct face attributes. You can see we still got some UV map left over. Pull that down, pull that over, and that did not line up to the grid, did it? I mean, it might have. It might be this one that's off. One of these is off. All right, anyways, you'd have to figure something like that out. This one's off. Okay, pull that one up. That'll preserve some of that texture on the inside there. If you can get lucky and reselect it, that'd be awesome. So I'm gonna hide these real quick. We'll see if that works. It didn't. I don't know what's going on. I should have pushed him back first, but yep. I might have wanted to split them as well because that skewed it. All right. So normally, let's do this again real quick. Normally what you do is you would just literally extrude out with correct face attributes on. So you can just extrude out each face, okay? You want to do it like that because what's going to happen is if you have these connected, that's where the skew comes from. So now you can turn correct face attributes off you can grab all of them at the same time for the guys and just push them all back, which we had troubles with just a second ago, but now we're gonna push each one back to where it needs to go. All right, so we don't have to necessarily destroy the whole process here, but you can see we kind of wrap that texture back in on itself. We'll have seams in the corners, but you can't really see them anyway, so not such a big deal. But there you go. Now you have more or less a modular little window frame as well. Okay, you can totally add weather stripping to it or whatever else you got to do, right? It all comes together with stuff like this. Okay, so the whole environment is not as complicated as you think. It's just going to be a lot of trial and error. Look for modularity in everything that exists everywhere. These are many pipes as well. This is the same way you would build a pipe, right? Think about that. Instead of doing I do a Control B, hit C, and just mouse wheel up. Okay, it's not a perfect pipe, obviously, but get the idea? That's not the way you would build it, but it's close. Just gonna prove a point. Last thing I'm doing, all right? Proving a point here. Let's delete this in the middle. Might have to actually unwrap this one though. If you did work this way. Bridge loops. Number of cuts. Change the smoothness. Right? So if you're making a modular pipe set, now the origin point for pipes, probably be better off placing it over here as opposed to that corner there, perhaps. Something like that. In the center for these ones, maybe. You could still try to leave them off center as well if you wanted, but probably wouldn't work out as good. All right. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I just wanted to show you kind of how to go through this process of thinking. You're gonna have a lot of things to consider, like even the floors. You know, there's some thickness to this now, but when these floors go next to a doorway, instantly you see the problem, right? The bottom of the door is gone now. The door section itself, probably have to raise it, right? Probably gonna have to raise that whole section up so that this can exist there. Now, when you do raise it up, I highly recommend leaving the cut all the way to the bottom, right? So when you just literally just raise it, right? You're not doing anything, you shouldn't be doing anything more than that. Because if you do, you're gonna run into problems. So what you thought your door size was and you thought it started on the grid, it might start off the grid a little bit. Just depends on how you build out your kit. Is that required? No. If you have really thin floors and you don't have multiple story buildings or something, don't worry about that. If you do have multiple story buildings and you have um, just a different way of laying in the walls, maybe you don't need them all to be matching top to bottom or something. I don't know. You can probably just do it a different way. It's what's working for you. I can't solve all those problems for you. You have to get in there. You have to get playing around with the different units, the different measurements, and just have a little bit of fun while you're exploring it. Play with these kinds of blockout shapes, right? You don't have to start creating perfect art right away. You know, you get comfortable with, throwing these together to create different things. Before you know it, you'll be able to polish those up and turn them into AAA assets or whatever you want. And it's not going to be so bad after you, because this is the fundamentals here. All right. And think about how you're going to name this stuff too. All of this is going to get named. Everything. You're going to have to name it either wall A or wall A01, right? So 01 is usually like a variation. A is just like the major category or major type of, and then the variation of it is either 01, 02, or you might have like an underscore damaged. It could be a sub-kit of something. So maybe you have like an industrial room that has all of its own static mesh, as opposed to like the whole factory having a bunch of generic walls everywhere. Think about what's going on there. Okay. Sub-kits, I probably should just mention this before we go. If you think about low level to high level, like your whole environment's going to be your high level, right? Because you're going to make doors and all kinds of stuff to work in this level, but that whole level is going to create a power plant or an oil refinery or something, some kind of city or something. It's a lot of stuff to create, right? But your low level is the stuff that helps you create all of that. So that's going to be like your base trim sheets, you know, if they're modular or not, modular trim sheets, so you can use them throughout multiple kits. You're gonna have like maybe a sub kit for a certain area, such as like a sewer, a drain, a pipe. Might have a sub kit for I don't know, just you could keep going on and on. Think about it in that manner. Like you're trying to develop these base tools to create door frames, windows. You need certain types of, well, first of all, it really should start with dimensions. You need to know how big your characters are, because if your characters can't fit through your door, then it's going to be a problem, right? So you need to think about how big your characters are, how fast you want people to be able to run up the stairs. You know, do you need double doors, ultra wide doors? Do you need like what do you need out of your level, right? Create more or less these shapes, play around with it, and create a gym. If you don't know what a gym is in Unreal Engine, checkerboard map where you test out all the functionality of your mechanics and all that. Create a gym, create these pieces, see if they work with your characters and whether they can jump or slide through things or squeeze or whatever. Start setting up blueprints for how the doors open and close or whatever the case, all the functionality. And then if you don't have that already, it's going to be really hard to kind of key in on what you need to do, right? Because your character might just be a little bit larger than an average character or a little bit smaller, and then everything's going to look completely out of proportion when you get into a game environment. Can you scale up? Can you scale down? Yes, but it's really hard to do it after the fact, right? Because everything's got to match up to the grid just right. Then you run into a problem, big problem, anyways. So those fundamentals are important. Play around with the UV mapping. What if you're going to need trim sheets? You name it. There's a lot of stuff to consider, but it's very core. It's kind of simple. You know, it's just these aren't hard shapes to make, and they turn into walls really fast. You know, but overall, it's pretty much it, right? All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't have really anything else to add to this, I don't think. Not at this moment, but yeah, thanks for watching. I'll check you guys out next time. All right, take care.